What if I told you there's a law school change happening right now that flips the entire admissions game on its head, but most applicants are still obsessing over personal statements? I'm talking about the thing that controls everything else, how law school gets paid for. Because starting this year, federal graduate borrowing is capped. Grad PLUS loans, is the blank check that used to cover whatever the school charged, that's now gone for new borrowers. And if you understand what that actually means, you're going to see something that most applicants completely miss. And if you're applying in 2026 or beyond, this affects your strategy more than almost anything else. For years, the law school financing model was brutally simple. A law school posts a cost of attendance, sometimes $80, $85, even $90,000 a year. When you factor in living expenses, you borrow federal loans, and if there's a gap, Grad PLUS loans fill it, done. The system would say, here's X, and students borrowed X. And when borrowing is unlimited, tuition naturally increases, because it can. Schools didn't price based on what education should cost, they priced based on what the federal government would finance. And that's how you end up with a total cost of attendance that's basically the size of a mortgage. And students shrug it off and just say, that's what law school costs, because the money was there, and it was almost too easy to get. And when money's easy, people stop asking, is this actually worth it? Financially, mathematically, is the return on this investment worth it? But now the rules have changed, and they changed in two major ways. First, Grad PLUS goes away for new borrowers. And second, there are now hard caps on federal borrowing for graduate and professional programs. For professional programs like law school, the federal annual cap is $50,000 per year with a $200,000 lifetime cap. And so if your law school's total cost of attendance per year is $85,000 and the federal max is $50,000, you've got a $35,000 gap every single year. And across 3 years, that's over $100,000 you now have to cover some other way. Maybe it's through savings or family or private loans or work income. You got to find a way. Instead of the school setting the price and you just borrowing it, we've shifted to the government setting the max, and the school has to now justify the rest. Now, I want to read you something, because this is already happening. The following is from a real email sent by a law school after the Grad PLUS elimination. They wrote, and I quote here, "We know that deciding where to apply to law school is about more than rankings or coursework. It's also about the support you'll receive along the way. As federal loan limits increasingly fall short of covering the full cost of attending law school, WashU Law is introducing a new supplemental loan designed to help eligible JD students bridge that gap. Translation, we know the government isn't covering it anymore, so here's a private loan." They continue, quote, "The WashU Law Supplemental Loan is a private loan available exclusively to incoming JD students. Students may borrow up to $25,000 per year. The loan features a fixed 7.5% interest rate, no credit check, no collateral, and no additional fees." And then the kicker. We believe a WashU law education should be ambitious, collaborative, and accessible. Accessible. If accessibility requires a 7.5% private supplemental loan to attend, the word's kind of lost its meaning here. And I'm not singling out WashU here. I'm saying this is the new playbook. Schools are scrambling to plug the hole to fill that gap between what you can borrow from the government and what they want to charge in tuition. So let's talk about what this actually changes, because it changes three things that matter to everybody applying. The first big thing is, of course, tuition and scholarships. Under the old model, a school could charge you $85,000 per year and still fill seats because federal loans made it possible. Now, if enough students look at that $35,000 gap and say, I can't make it work, the school has a real problem. And they've got three options now. They could cut tuition, they could increase the scholarships they offer, or they could shrink the class size. And all three of those are going to hurt them, and they pose an existential threat to many of these schools. And so scholarships stop being about simply rewarding merit, and they start being about making the program financeable, meaning you can finance the cost to attend. Merit scholarships become a pricing strategy to close the gap between what they want to charge and what you can actually borrow. And even schools that never really wanted to discount themselves much, they might be forced to. Because if enough students can't make the math work, seats are going to go empty, and empty seats are a crisis. Schools need to fill their capacity to finance their overhead. The second big outcome is that your outcomes, your bar passage rates, your employment outcomes, that's going to start dominating the conversation. If borrowing was easy, schools could emphasize things like, we live in a great city, we have amazing clinics, we have a supportive community, and all of that sounds really nice. But when there is a $100,000 gap across 3 years, you're going to start asking harder questions to see if you can justify what you're investing. Are you getting a sufficient return on it? You want to ask, for example, what percentage of graduates get JD required jobs? What are the median salaries? What's the bar passage rate? Are their scholarships conditional? How many students lose them? Because if you graduate and you're not making what you projected, the math, the loans, the debt, they're not going to care how beautiful the campus was. You want to gravitate towards schools with stronger employment outcomes. And those schools are going to be fine. They're going to adjust, they'll be able to compete, they're going to survive. But the schools with weak outcomes and high sticker prices, they are exposed because private loans are not a clean substitute for unlimited federal borrowing. Most private lenders are going to do credit checks. Most of them will require cosigners. And of course, the rates are higher. And private lenders are going to price risk. If a school has weak employment outcomes, a private lender might look at that loan and they're going to say, we don't like this debt. Or they're going to offer brutal terms that you're not going to want to take on. And if a school requires private underwriting to attend, if you have to go for private lenders, the population that can attend the school is going to shift. Now let's talk about who gets hurt here. A lot of people hear loan caps and assume it only hurts lower income students. But think about who got crushed hardest under the old system. It was the students who didn't have lawyers in the family, didn't have financial guidance, didn't really know how to evaluate law school outcomes. Those students were the most likely to trust the marketing, borrow as much as they could, and find out too late that it wasn't a good ROI. But in a strange way, the loan caps actually do act as a blunt form of consumer protection. They force you to ask the question earlier, will this realistically pay off for me? Now let's talk about the schools that feel this first. The most exposed programs are going to tend to be high-cost schools with limited institutional money, schools that have weaker employment outcomes, schools that relied on filling seats at high sticker prices, schools where most students already borrowed close to the full cost of attendance. When borrowing gets capped, net tuition revenue is going to drop. And once that starts, you're going to have a cascade of smaller class sizes, tighter budgets, fewer resources, weaker employment outcomes, and lower bar passage rates. It's more of a slow squeeze. It doesn't happen overnight. But some schools are going to shrink, some are going to merge, some are going to close. It's just basic economics. Now, here's the trap I want you to avoid. A lot of applicants will respond to all of this with one of two extremes. One extreme is where they say, law school is dead, it's impossible, it's over, I'm not even going to do it. Then you have the others who are more thinking they're in the special snowflake category saying, none of this applies to me, I'm going to figure it out later. And both extremes are wrong. The right response is you got to treat law school like an investment with uncertainty. That means you ask a couple of serious questions and you answer them with real numbers. You actually map this out using a spreadsheet. Number one, what is the total annual cost of attendance, including fees and living expenses? Schools are going to love to just spotlight tuition and bury everything else in fine print. You want to calculate the total. Second, what is the realistic federal borrowing cap for your situation? If it's below the cost to attend, you want to figure out what's that gap. And you're allowed to borrow $50,000 per year for professional programs, but if you've already borrowed For other professional education in the past, what you can borrow going forward might be lower. The third question is, how are you going to cover that gap? Is it going to be through savings, through family support, scholarships? Are you going to go for private loans? Do you have income from work? If you don't know, that's a problem. You got to figure it out. Fourth, you want to ask, what are the typical outcomes at this school? Not the outlier outcomes, not the top 1%, but the median. And this is where you want to look at the ABA 509 reports. You want to look at the American Bar Association data on employment outcomes, bar passage rates, JD required roles. Then finally, what's going to happen if you don't hit your projected salary? Are you still going to be able to pay your rent? Can you still live? If you have a problem, that of course matters. You want to know that now. And if you don't know the answers to these questions, you might not be ready to go yet. Now, let's take this back to the LSAT because that's where it all starts. That's where you have control. Of course, you can't control what the federal government does. You can't control what tuition is going to be, but you can control your LSAT score. And in this new environment where borrowing is capped, a higher LSAT score gives you options. Scholarships become less about rewarding merit and more about making enrollment financially viable. Your LSAT score is how schools are going to justify giving you that money. If your LSAT score helps them maintain their medians, raise their standing in the US News rankings, they'll be able to justify helping you close that financing gap. If you can get 5 more points on your LSAT, that might mean an additional $30,000 to $90,000 in scholarship leverage across 3 years. And your score gives you multiple offers that you can compare with each other, that you can negotiate against each other, and of course, you're always free to walk away. The schools need you more than you need them. Now, a lot of students think that because the LSAT no longer has logic games, it's somehow now easier. You've got logical reasoning as 2/3 of the test. Reading comp is the remaining third that's often neglected. But your prep doesn't change. It's got to be precise. You devote 2/3 of your study time to logical reasoning, since it's 2/3 of the exam, of course. Don't neglect reading comp either. You also need to build up your endurance, doing full-length timed exams to build up your stamina. Most people underestimate the stamina portion. They spend too much time drilling questions, but never build up their endurance for back-to-back timed sections in 1-2.5 hour sitting. And that is a mistake because in this new era going forward, the difference between a 163 and a 168, just 5 points, could determine whether you can afford to pay for law school at all. Your LSAT performance directly impacts whether law school is financially viable. Now, here's what I expect you're going to see over the coming cycle. You're going to see more guaranteed scholarships, fewer conditional scholarships, as schools try to bring prices closer to what you can actually finance. You will be able to aggressively negotiate your scholarships, even though there's more competition, more people applying. We're going to see more scrutiny of conditional scholarships as applicants get smarter about the fine print. And you'll have a bigger divide between schools who have strong employment outcomes and the schools that don't. Now, the applicants that win in this environment do 3 things. First, they maximize their LSAT scores to create leverage to negotiate those scholarships. They evaluate schools based on cost and outcomes, looking at those ABA 509 reports, and they build a plan that's going to work even if their first job out of law school isn't $250,000 a year. Law school's not over. You can still make it worth the investment, but blind borrowing no longer makes sense. And the earlier you internalize that, the more power you're going to have. Because this year and beyond, the smartest applicants aren't the ones with the best personal statements. They're the ones who understand that the financing model changed and they adjusted their strategy before everybody else did. And if you think that way now, you're already ahead. And if you want my help getting the highest possible LSAT score so you can better negotiate your scholarships, close that gap, help you finance law school, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That is an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. And for those of you just joining, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place. 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So if you could share this to your profile, share it to your socials, share it in any group chats, Discords, Facebook groups, subreddits, I really do appreciate the support. I see a ton of questions coming into the chat here. I will get to as many of them as I can. Keep them coming. Just going to scan through here to see what's been coming in. Bobby says, I interviewed at Columbia the first day of February and no response since. Am I cooked? No. So law schools are taking longer and longer to get back to applicants. If you haven't heard back even after several weeks, even after months, doesn't necessarily mean anything at all. It just means that law schools are rude and they don't get back to people when they should, which would be polite to do, of course, but don't take it as an indication of whether you're getting in or not. What you could do, if you haven't heard in a while, is you send a letter of continued interest, basically reiterating your interest in the school, saying, hey, just wanted to let you know, X law school, Columbia Law in this case, is still my top choice. I would love to attend. Here's a quick update on what I've been up to since I last applied or since I interviewed. I got X promotion in my job. I got X award. My GPA rose last semester, whatever it is. Give them some sort of update if you can. If you visited the campus since then, say that. If you talked to an alum since then, say that. Anything that will help them remember you, make a positive impression, and make it clear that they're still your first choice. Thoughts on Croissants asks, would you retake a 172 for a top 5 law school? I have a 3.997 GPA. Awesome. Okay, so your GPA is killer, super close to a 4.0. We can just round and say 4.0 for now. You got a 4.0 and a 172. The thing is that the top 5 law schools have crazy high medians. Their medians are all around a 3.9 already, but their LSAT medians are ranging in around a 173, 174. So a 172, while it's an incredible LSAT score, is still technically below median for LSAT. And so if you retook, you could get your LSAT above their median. Getting a 175 or a 176 would, of course, put you in a better position than a 172 will. And the good news is that law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take into consideration the highest LSAT score on your record. And so if you retake and do better, great, you're now applying with a higher LSAT score. If you retake and do worse or it stays the same, no big deal. The highest LSAT score on your record is still what counts. So yeah, retaking is not crazy. You could retake in April and submit an update to them. A lot of folks retake the LSAT in April for scholarship reconsideration, basically retaking the LSAT to get a higher score to have more leverage to negotiate scholarships. But you could also retake to help you get off the wait list. The April LSAT's not too late for that purpose. It might be late for applying in general, but for retake consideration, waitlist consideration, scholarship consideration, it's not a bad idea. Geet Yam asks, do you have any information about McGeorge School of Law? I mean, what kind of information are you looking for? There's nothing I can really tell you about most law schools you couldn't learn by Googling. I mean, the biggest things that you should be looking for right now about law schools are, number one, what are the requirements? And number two, what are the unique aspects of the school that might lead you to want to attend or not? So requirements, LSAT score, GPA, you can find those in a given law school's ABA 509 reports, at least for American law schools. Canada is a different story, don't know as much about that. But for any of the 200 or so American Bar Association accredited law schools, you can see their LSAT scores and their GPA medians right there on the website. Then for the factors like, would you want to attend? The question is, well, is it urban, suburban, rural? Is it in a part of the country you'd want to live in? Is it located near where you'd want to practice law? For a T14, not as important, of course, but for a regional law school, it's typically better to go to a regional school if you want to practice law in that region where it has a better reputation and you're going to be networking better there. Relatedly, I see Apples is asking, how does Brooklyn Law compare to NYU? I mean, in what way? I mean, they're both in New York, of course, but NYU is a T6 law school. Brooklyn Law is much lower ranked. But, I mean, they're not too far apart from each other geographically. The question is really, do you want to go into big law? Do you want to go take on less debt? If so, go to Brooklyn Law. Get more scholarship money. If you want to go into big law and you're willing to take on more debt, then go to NYU. They're radically different calibers in terms of prestige, but if you want to stay in New York and not go into big law, maybe Brooklyn Law makes more sense because you'll save a lot of money on your tuition. And if you want to stay in New York City, you've got like a dozen different options for law schools. You've also got Columbia, you've also got Fordham, you've got St. John's, and you've got Hofstra, for example. You've got Rutgers right across the river. You've got Cardozo. Tons of options. Tons of options. You could apply to all of them and negotiate with them against each other for scholarship money. Is Cardozo the best in NYC? I don't love the question, what is best? There's no singular best. Best for what purpose? Best for taking on less debt? Best for big law jobs? Those are different answers. What are your goals? What do you want to do with your law degree? That's going to help you determine what's best for you. If your number one priority is taking on zero debt for law school, I would say probably don't go to NYU. Go to a lower ranked law school where you can get more scholarship money. If your number one priority is working at a white shoe law firm, getting a big law salary right out of graduating where you're making $200,000 plus a year, maybe you want to go to NYU. If you want to go into public interest, then maybe taking on less debt's a better path. I see Sephora is asking, I have a 2.9 GPA and a 173 LSAT. Does my GPA prevent me from going to law school? Should I retake the LSAT? So your GPA is not going to necessarily prevent you from going to law school. Obviously, it'd be better if your GPA was higher, but it is what it is. A 173 is a great LSAT score. But like I was saying to someone previously, I mean, you could retake to get even better outcomes. A 176, 177 will improve your admissions over the 173. And because your GPA is lower, you want to balance it out with a relatively higher LSAT score. Of course, I always want everybody to shoot for the highest possible LSAT, but the lower your GPA, the more important raising your LSAT score becomes. So you could retake. The question is, do you have time in your calendar to retake the LSAT? The LSAT is offered 8 times a year. We've got the April LSAT coming up in just about a month. We've got June coming up in about 3 months. The deadline to sign up for the April LSAT has passed, but if you're already signed up for it, you could, of course, go for that. If you want to go for June, that gives you more time, of course. So think to yourself, could you improve your score by 3 points in the next 3 months? To go up from a 173 to a 176 actually would be meaningful, believe it or not. It's a lot more meaningful than going from a 150 to a 153, for example. But those 3 points matter a lot at the top end. And so the question is there any additional prep that you could have done that you didn't take advantage of that now could get you some additional points? Because if you've been studying on your own, I see that you said you had a fee waiver. So if you were studying on your own without private support, if we add that support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost to be had, meaning there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. Because when you're on your own, you don't know what you don't know. And so for anyone out there looking for support, looking for some personal guidance, I'm personally aware of just how impactful private coaching can be, having helped thousands of students over the past 20 years. And so for that reason, I'm actually offering everybody on here free LSAT tutoring. That's an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Open offer for everybody watching this now or later, because what I found is that if we can get you a couple quick wins, help you figure out some blind spots when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. And so we add that support into the mix. There's usually a lot of low-hanging fruit, a lot of quick wins. So feel free to book the call with me if you want to talk through that more. Janelle's asking, are there any ABA accredited law schools that are fully online? Yeah, there are a handful of them. St. Mary's is one in Texas. There's also Syracuse. Then there are a couple of hybrid programs as well, like Mitchell Hamlin was one of the first. If you go on the ABA website, there's roughly 15, 20 different law schools that offer some form of online education. Some are fully online, some are hybrid. They're super competitive, though. Everybody wants to do them, and there aren't nearly enough of them available. And so keep in mind that the general requirements to get into a given law school are less than if you wanted to go to the online version of that law school in particular. So the medians for attending St. Mary's, for example, don't look that competitive, but for the online version of St. Mary's in particular, it's a bit tougher because they have such a limited number of slots available relative to the number of people who want to go. I see Hayray's asking, ideal time to give yourself to study for the LSAT. So I recommend a minimum of 3 months, ideally 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential. A lot of students try to do it in less time, but given the importance of the LSAT, it's worth giving it 5, 6 months. I mean, it weighs more heavily than your entire undergrad GPA combined. So why wouldn't you give it more than a couple of months? I mean, when are you planning on taking it, Hayray? I mean, you could aim for June as your first take, then go for August as a backup. June gives you 3 months. That could be a first at bat just to get a sense of what it's like. But you give yourself till August, you've then got 5 months, nearly doubling your study duration. You could do way more with an additional 2 months. And the nice thing about going for June and August is that you can still apply the second applications open in the fall. Yeah, if you want to go for August, that's plenty of time. Then the next question is, well, what's your goal score? And have you taken a practice test? If you want to go for August and achieve a 180, it's going to take more work than if you want to achieve a 160, for example. And if you haven't even taken a practice test, that's okay. That's the first step. Take a practice test, see where you stand. Don't take it as indicative of what your potential is or as destiny for how you're going to do. It just tells you what you already know, which is that you haven't learned the LSAT yet, but you can. And maybe it'll give you some motivation, some fuel to put in the work necessary to achieve a top score. But it's really important that you take that cold diagnostic under realistic test-to-take conditions. That's 4 sections, back-to-back, 1 sitting, only a 10-minute break between sections 2 and 3. What a lot of students do is they make the mistake of only taking 1 or 2 sections at a time, then adding them up later and calling out a full exam, but that's not testing the stamina component. So you got to take it in 1 sitting. And I see that you're saying you want a 175. That's a great goal. That's top 1%. I actually got a 175 on my LSAT, and I know what it takes to get that kind of score. It's not easy. And I can help you do it more efficiently than I did because it took me an entire year, and at least half of that was a total waste of time. If I'd done it properly, I could have done it in a couple months because it's all pattern recognition. We just got to help you spot the tricks and traps. And so if you want to talk through what that plan could look like, you could book the free tutoring lesson with me. The link's in my bio. ICA is also looking for that 175 by August. Yeah, I mean, a 175 is above the median of every single law school in the country, including the top 14 law schools. And so it's a goal worth shooting for. So book the call with me. It's free. We could talk through what your action plan could look like. Just scanning through for other questions here in the chat. Michael asks, if I'm able to graduate early, should I delay my graduation to take easy classes and boost my GPA? I see you thinking like a lawyer here looking for loopholes. I love it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's not a terrible idea, frankly. If you can extend your bachelor's to take more classes to raise your average grade, basically boost your GPA by taking more easy A classes on the tail end there, that would be a way to raise your GPA. Not a terrible path. There are downsides, though. One is that you are spending more money on your college tuition because you're paying for additional classes, potentially. So you're spending more on your tuition per semester, per college credit. It's also costing you time in terms of months of additional undergrad, as well as time over the course of your week. And that time could have been devoted to studying for the LSAT. I'm not going to say whether it's a good plan or a bad plan. It all depends on whether you can devote the time invested in these classes and the college tuition invested as well. Alternatively, you could just say to yourself, you know what, my GPA is my GPA. I'm going to focus more on my LSAT at this stage. And your LSAT weighs more heavily than all of undergrad put together. And so maybe if you have limited time, it might be a better plan to spend that time devoted to LSAT studying instead. Might be. Not saying one path is right or wrong, but keep in mind your LSAT's the biggest factor in admissions. I see Salk is asking, how do I stop myself from feeling hopeless against all the competition this cycle? I mean, it is a competitive cycle, not going to sugarcoat that. You have more people applying than in the past, the most people applying in the past, say, 15 years or so, since 2011 or so. So there are a lot more people applying to law school for the same limited number of seats, and so it is more competitive. Not going to sugarcoat that. I think that we help you stop feeling hopeless by giving you concrete evidence that you're going to do well in admissions. So what we do is we say, okay, well, what are your numbers? What's your LSAT score? What's your GPA? Then what are the medians of the schools that you're applying to? And if we can show you that your numbers are higher than the medians of the schools you're applying to, then you've got a relatively better shot. If your numbers were below the medians, then frankly, you would be right to be hopeless, or at least feel pessimistic about it, because you would say, hey, my odds are not very good, my numbers are weak. If we can show you that your numbers are strong, and if they are actually strong, then you should feel pretty optimistic. And so my questions would be, how many law schools have you applied to? Applying to more schools is better than applying to fewer schools, all else being equal, because the more at-bats you have, the more likely you are to hit a home run. The second question is, out of those schools you have applied to, how many of them are safety schools? How many are target schools? How many are reach schools? Let's say hypothetically you applied to, I'll keep the math simple, you applied to 18 law schools, which is not crazy, by the way, 18 law schools. Out of those 18, 6 are reach schools where you are below the numbers. 6 are target schools where your numbers are basically on point at the medians, and 6 are safety schools where your numbers are above the medians. If you did that, you should feel pretty decent about your odds, because you're probably going to get into most of the 6 safety schools. Maybe you'll get into 3 of the target schools. Maybe you'll get into 1 or 2 of the reach schools if you get lucky. So if you did that, then you should get into roughly 10 schools on average. These are rough numbers, of course. And so the questions become, what's your LSAT? What's your GPA? And what are the medians of the schools you're looking at? I see you're following up here, Saka, saying, I currently have a 3.72 GPA and a 153 cold diagnostic. I'm trying to aim for a 175 on the LSAT. Okay, so the issue here is that there's a big gap between your cold diagnostic score and your goal score. We've got to close that 22-point gap, which is very doable, by the way. I mean, your numbers are actually pretty close to what my numbers were like. I started off at a 152, 1 point below your cold diagnostic, and I ended up with a 175. So I'm living proof that it's possible. I think you're feeling pessimistic because you're not close to your goal right now, LSAT-wise. It's realistic that you could improve there to your goal, but you've got some work ahead of you. So basically, the solution is simple. Let's get you a proper LSAT study plan. Let's get you some support. Let's raise your score 22 points. Then, with your decent GPA of 3.72 and your 175 official LSAT score on record on your score report, you should, by that point, be feeling pretty optimistic when all's said and done at the end of this journey, because you will have numbers that make you competitive for the vast majority of law schools you could theoretically apply to. So I think you might just be hopeless now because your numbers do not support your law school goals. But we can raise your numbers, get you a better LSAT score, and then you'll be in the running for a lot of competitive law schools. So you're saying you're taking the June LSAT, studying 5 hours a day. Okay, so June LSAT's 3 months away. Studying 5 hours a day is pretty good. I typically wouldn't recommend that most folks study more than 5 hours a day anyway, because I don't want you to burn out. I recommend max 5 to 6 hours a day of studying when you have few to no other obligations, meaning you're not in school, you're not working, or if so, you're working very, very part-time, few other obligations. That could be fine. That isn't necessarily excessive. But if you have a lot of other obligations, then of course, 5 hours a day might be too much and we don't want you to burn out. And so one thing we do for our students is we create for you a personal study plan in collaboration with your coach, laying out exactly what to do every single day from now till your test. So if you want some more personal guidance on what your study plan could look like to get you from the 153 up to 175, you can book the free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. It's below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That's an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. I see Olivia's asking, my first LSAT was a 143. My GPA is currently 365. Not aiming for a T14 school. What are your thoughts? My first thought is let's raise your LSAT score, because a 143 is a below average LSAT score. Frankly, it's subpar. I mean, the median LSAT in general is a 152 or so, and most law schools worth attending are going to require a higher LSAT. Your GPA is okay, it's not terrible, but because of just the ridiculous degree of grade inflation there is right now, a lot of solid law schools, even those outside the T14, have GPA medians of 3.7 or above, so you'd still be below their GPA median, so you want to offset that with a higher LSAT score. I think that your admissions outcomes will be significantly better if we can get your LSAT even up to a 160 plus range. And so feel free to book the call with me if you want to talk through what a plan could look like for that. You could retake in June or August and have much better outcomes applying in the fall. I see Sephora is asking, do law schools truly accept splitter applicants, or should I just apply the safe route? So yes, law schools do accept splitter applicants, meaning you do not need to be above both medians in order to be competitive. If you are below the GPA median, but you're above the LSAT median, your higher LSAT score could offset a relatively lower GPA. One can balance out and make up for the other. I would never recommend applying to only safety schools where you're above both medians. I think that'd be selling yourself short. I think it's worthwhile to cast a wide net, get as many options before you as possible. The more offers of acceptance you have, the better an outcome you can choose for yourself. I mean, what you're deciding here is going to set the trajectory of the rest of your legal career. Where you go to law school will determine your employment opportunities upon graduating. It will determine how much debt you're taking on for law school. It'll determine what you can earn as an attorney for the next several decades. And so I would always recommend that you shoot your shot. Don't sell yourself short. Do apply to some reach schools. See what happens. You could get lucky. Every cycle is different. But if you've got, I think you said you had a 173 LSAT. I mean, that's a great LSAT score. And that will weigh more heavily than your GPA. And you can also retake the LSAT for an even higher score as well. That wouldn't be crazy to do. I see Liz is asking about the reverse splitter situation. Can a 3.9 GPA counterbalance a 143? To some extent, yes. But the unfortunate thing is that, and I say unfortunate in your situation in particular here, law schools typically weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA. And so it'd be better to have a high LSAT and a low GPA than a high GPA and a low LSAT. Because while there is rampant grade inflation, there's rampant LSAT score inflation, GPA inflation is even worse. So a 3.9 GPA is not as unique as you might think. And a 143, again, is a pretty low LSAT score, speaking frankly. You can improve it. And when you're at a 143, the good news is that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, a lot of quick wins. We could focus on just the most common LSAT question types and get you a pretty big boost. I mean, the most common ones in logical reasoning, for example, are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. So if you just start there, work on reading comp as well for just a couple of months, you should be able to improve 15, 20 points without a crazy amount of studying. It's a lot easier to go from a 143 to a 160 than to go from a 163 to a 180. The points are easier to earn the lower that you are. So I think you'd be selling yourself short by not improving your score before applying. And the LSAT's offered 8 times a year, plenty of times that you could retake it. Coming up, we got April, June, August. Then there's September, October, and November. You could take any of those LSATs and apply in the coming cycle. I see Matthew's asking about extracurriculars and internships. Frankly, it would be a waste of your time to spend time on those if you haven't yet earned the LSAT score. And if your GPA is below median, I wouldn't want you to detract from your grades by spending time on them if you're still in college. Because the truth is that law schools don't care that much about your resume, your extracurriculars, your internships. They're nice to have, of course, they're going to see them, but law school admissions is much more numbers driven than undergrad admissions is. So first, lock in the LSAT score, keep your GPA high. If you've done both of those things, then yeah, you could spend time on the extracurriculars and internships. If you have more than enough LSAT study time and you have some free time in your schedule to do other stuff, by all means do it. But make sure that you're managing your calendar carefully and you're not doing these other things at the expense of your LSAT prep or maintaining a good GPA. Parad is asking, what would you say about somebody that went from a 154 in November to a 168 in January? Do you need an addendum? No, you don't. The score speaks for itself. What are you going to say? I studied more, my score went up? Obviously, right? There's no need to explain that. It is what it is. The numbers speak for themselves. Law schools only have incentive to care about the highest LSAT score on your record because that's what they report to the American Bar Association, which in turn is where US News pulls the information from for inclusion in the rankings. And if you wanted to retake it again to improve your score even more, if you think you could do better and get a 170 plus in April or June, then go for that. Not saying you need to, but you could. I see a question about retaking from Keith. How many times can you retake the LSAT in 1 year? So LSAT has actually removed some of the previous retake limits. You can now take the LSAT 5 times in 5 years, 7 times for life. And if you get a 180, you can't take it again. Those are the only retake limits that remain now. So you could take the LSAT. I mentioned earlier the test dates coming up this year. You've got April, June, August, September, October, November. If you've never taken the LSAT before, you could theoretically take 5 out of those 6 upcoming LSAT test dates. Not saying you should, but hypothetically you could. And I do recommend that everybody take the LSAT at least twice for the simple reason that law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take the highest. And so if you do better, great, you've now got a higher score. If you do worse or stay the same, no big deal. And also no addendum necessary. If you ask law schools, they will always tell you, yeah, just write the addendum. But I think it's because they want to get rid of you. And that's the easiest way for them to send you off. They'll look at the addendum, but really, again, who cares? The numbers are the numbers. If you took it 6 or 7 times and you're like, you know what, I feel really iffy about that, and you want to tell them, hey, I had a bad proctor, I had tech issues, the person next to me like vomited at the testing center, yeah, you could write that down. And that will be nice context, but again, all they really want to see is the number because of the medians, because of the rankings. And additionally, keep in mind that the LSAT actually serves a useful function for law schools. I mean, you've probably seen some of these headlines about the ABA allowing schools to go test optional, and law schools no longer have to use the LSAT for admissions. But they still use it anyway. Almost nobody gets in without the LSAT. And the reason is that the LSAT serves a useful purpose for law schools. It helps them get a general sense of your academic abilities. It serves a predictive function for how you're going to do in first year of law school, how likely you are to pass the bar exam. The LSAT is considered predictive because it is somewhat correlated with your first year law school grades and bar passage rates. It's not a one-to-one correlation, of course, not a perfect predictor, but it is somewhat predictive, and it is a stronger predictor than your undergraduate GPA because of rampant grade inflation in undergrad, as well as the fact that undergraduate GPA is not really a standardized metric, right? You have people majoring in all different subjects for law school. You could major in English, you could major in comp sci, you could major in physics, criminal justice, doesn't matter. You can go to law school. And of course, an A in criminal justice is not the same thing as an A in comp sci. Additionally, some people are applying to law school who did undergrad last week. Others did it 20 years ago, and those will obviously have different impacts on someone standing today. In contrast, you earned your LSAT score probably in the last year or two, and it's the same no matter what you majored in or where you went to undergrad. Zanahori is saying, as a criminal justice major, I'm nervous. It's fine. Listen, I mean, ultimately, the grade is the grade. Your GPA is your GPA. And law schools don't really care what you majored in. And so if your GPA is good, awesome. If not, we think about the LSAT now as the next biggest way that you can improve your odds of admission. So the answer ultimately is often going to be the same that I give folks, which is just get a higher LSAT score that will solve a lot of your problems. I see Lucas is asking, so should I study for about 4 months and take it in June if I've been casual starting at a 153? Well, first off, don't be casual about this because this is the #1 biggest needle mover for you in your odds of admission. Secondly, 153 is not a bad starting point. It's right about where I started. You can improve 10, 15, 20 points or more by June or by August. The June LSAT's a great target test for your first take. You could retake it in August and apply the second applications open in September. You've got 3 months till June, 5 months till August, plenty of time to improve significantly and get a top score. And for those just joining, by the way, in case you haven't heard, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. Links below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. And I also offer these lives for free every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find this helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth, so share it to your socials, Discord, Facebook groups, subreddits. I do appreciate the support. I see Jen is asking, wait, what do you mean? What do you recommend majoring in? I mean, don't major in something just because I said to major in it. And by the way, I didn't say to major in anything in particular. What I said was that you can major in literally anything and go to law school. Law schools do not care what you majored in. So my ruthless law school admissions advice, meaning if the only thing you cared about was getting into the best law school with as much scholarship money as possible, and you were certain that law school was what you wanted to do, I would say major in something where you can get a 4.0 GPA. Because law schools, when they calculate your odds of admission using what is called an admissions index, which is a formula where they combine your undergraduate GPA and your LSAT score, that formula is agnostic to, meaning it doesn't care what you majored in. And it's a lot harder to get a 4.0 in a STEM major than it is to go 4.0 in, say, English or criminal justice, because humanities majors give you easier A's than STEM majors do. Just speaking frankly, feel free to disagree if your experience is different, but from my experience, that's the deal. And I say this as someone who majored in the humanities. So my advice would be, if that was your sole focus, get the easy A's. However, there are risks inherent to that, because if law school isn't what you want to do, if you're not totally sure, you'd want to maintain your options by majoring in something that would give you more employability without the JD. So consider carefully if law school is truly what you want to do. You also want to, if you're still an undergrad and you want to go directly from undergrad into law school, you want to allow some time somewhere to study for the LSAT. And so that could mean you study for the LSAT over the summer or over winter break, or in one particular semester, you take a relatively lighter course load to carve out 10, 15, maybe 20 hours a week to study for the LSAT. What I like about devoting your summer to LSAT prep is that you can go hard on it over the summer, take it in August or maybe September, and you're not trying to balance LSAT prep with your academics simultaneously. So to shorten his question here, I would say study for the LSAT when you think that you will have sufficient time to give it 10, 15, 20 hours a week. If you're already struggling with a full course load, if you're working full time, if you have family obligations and now is not a good time, then don't try to take it on right now. The LSAT's not going anywhere, and you could take the LSAT in any one of August, September, October, November, later this fall, and still apply the coming cycle, meaning in fall 2026, to start law school in fall of 2027. So there's no rush. The LSAT isn't going anywhere. But just look at your calendar, look at your schedule, think about when you want to do this. I recommend at minimum, ideally 10, 15 hours a week. If you can only do 5 to 10 hours a week of studying, then give yourself more months to study than you would otherwise. I remember, I think last week someone was saying that he could only do 2 hours a week. And I'm like, how serious are you about this really? Because 2 hours a week is not even 30 minutes a day. Right? And like, we got to give you some time to reach a critical mass or critical threshold where you're going to achieve escape velocity for this, meaning that we're going to give you sufficient forward momentum to remember what you're working on, build the skills, and maintain that consistent forward progress. So for our coaching programs, we like you to do at least 10 hours, 15 hours a week. If you can't do that much, this might not be the right time for you. But if you can do 10 hours a week, then of course, there's plenty of support we can give you to get more out of the 10 hours. I see a question about what kind of support we offer. So we offer personalized coaching programs where you get private one-on-one support with a coach. You get a personal custom study plan. You get access to live semi-private small group sessions in the evenings and our on-demand course as well. It's not a one-size-fits-all. We personalize every program to the individual student, considering where you're currently at, what your goal score is, and when you want to take the LSAT. And if you want to talk through what that could look like, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free private one-on-one coaching to everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free call with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. It's below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Open offer. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.